Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the heart of a war-torn land, the sky raged with fire and thunder as Karl, the renowned hero, faced the Dragon King in a battle that would decide the fate of the world. His armor, once gleaming, was now battered and scorched, but his resolve remained unshaken. The Dragon King, a towering beast of scales and malice, bellowed a roar that shook the earth, but Karl stood firm, gripping the hilt of the blade of eternity, an ancient sword forged in the fires of 1,000 dying stars. This was the moment he had trained for, fought for, and suffered for. The battle was fierce, with Karl dodging searing flames and slashing through the Dragon King's deadly claws. Each strike of his sword was met with a furious counterattack, but Karl's determination never wavered. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered, the air thick with the acrid smell of burning earth. The Dragon King unleashed a torrent of fire, but Karl leapt through it, his armor glowing red-hot, and delivered the final blow. The blade of eternity pierced the Dragon King's heart, and with a deafening roar, the beast fell. The earth trembled as the Dragon King's colossal body collapsed, sending shockwaves across the land. Karl stood victorious, panting and bloodied, as the sky began to clear. The battle was over. The war was won. With the Dragon King defeated, peace would finally return to the land. Karl sheathed his sword, his heart swelling with pride and relief. All that remained was to return home, where he expected to be greeted as a hero. But when Karl returned to his hometown, a small village nestled in the hills, he was met with an eerie silence. The villagers went about their daily lives, oblivious to the battle that had just saved their world. Karl approached a group of farmers he had known since childhood, but they barely glanced at him. His heart sank as he realized that they did not recognize him. He called out to them, recounting his journey, his victory, but his words were met with blank stares and polite nods. Karl's chest tightened as he hurried through the village, searching for anyone who might remember him. He found his old friend, Marcus, sitting outside the tavern, whittling a piece of wood. Karl rushed to him, but Marcus only looked up with mild curiosity. "Can I help you, stranger?" Marcus asked, his voice devoid of any recognition. "It's me, Karl," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "We grew up together. I just defeated the Dragon King." Marcus frowned, shaking his head slowly. "I'm sorry, but I don't know anyone by that name." "And the Dragon King? That's just an old legend." Karl staggered back, disbelief washing over him. How could this be? How could his greatest victory have been forgotten so quickly? He ran to his family's home, hoping against hope that they would remember him. But when he arrived, his mother and father stared at him as if he were a stranger. His mother, her hair now streaked with gray, smiled politely and asked if he needed directions. "Mother, it's me," Karl cried, his voice breaking. "It's Karl, your son." His mother's smile faltered, her brow furrowing in confusion. "I'm sorry, young man, but I don't have a son named Karl." Karl felt the ground beneath him give way as the full weight of his situation pressed down on him. No one remembered him. Not his friends, not his family, not even the village elders who had once praised him as a child. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Days turned into weeks as Karl wandered the village, trying to understand what had happened. He traveled to neighboring towns, hoping to find someone who remembered the war, the battles, or even the Dragon King. But everywhere he went, he was met with the same indifference, the same blank stares. The world had moved on, and he was nothing more than a forgotten shadow. Karl's despair deepened when he traveled to the capital city, hoping that someone in the royal court might remember him. The city was bustling with life, but there was something off about it. Buildings seemed to flicker between states of decay and grandeur, and the people's conversations looped in strange, nonsensical patterns. Time itself appeared to stutter, with moments repeating themselves like a broken record. In the heart of the city, Carl found the archives of the arcane, a vast library containing the knowledge of the world's greatest mages. He hoped to find answers there, some explanation for why he had been forgotten. The library was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and dust. Carl wandered through the towering shelves, searching for anything that might shed light on his predicament. After days of searching, Carl came across an ancient tome hidden in the deepest recesses of the library. The book was bound in worn leather, its pages yellowed with age. The title was barely legible, but Carl could make out the words, "The Weave of Reality." He opened the book and began to read. The tome spoke of a hidden truth, an intricate web of magic that sustained the world. The world, it claimed, was not as it seemed. It was a fragile construct, held together by a delicate balance of magical forces. The Dragon King, though a malevolent force, had been a crucial part of this balance. His presence had maintained the stability of the magical weave, and his defeat had begun to unravel it. Carl's heart pounded as he read on. The book explained that the world had a failsafe, a defense mechanism to prevent its total collapse in the event of a catastrophic disruption. When Carl defeated the Dragon King, the world's magic had recognized the threat and erased Carl from existence to stop the unraveling. This erasure was intended to buy time, but it was not a permanent solution. The weave was still unraveling, and soon, the world would collapse entirely unless something was done. Carl closed the book, his hands trembling. His victory had not brought peace, it had brought ruin. The world was falling apart because of him. But there was still hope. The book mentioned a ritual, the rite of oblivion, that could restore the balance. However, the ritual required an unthinkable sacrifice. Carl would have to erase himself completely, his name, his memories, his very essence. He would become part of the magical weave, a silent guardian of the world, unknown and unseen. Determined to save the world, Carl sought out the remaining sages, the last keepers of ancient knowledge. They confirmed what the book had said and guided Carl on his final quest. The rite of oblivion could only be performed at the world's edge, a mythical place where the boundaries of reality were thinnest. The journey would be perilous, filled with trials designed to test Carl's resolve. Carl set out on his journey, traveling through lands he had once saved, now crumbling under the weight of the world's instability. The sky was a constant swirl of ominous clouds, the earth cracked and groaned as if it were alive and in pain. Along the way, Carl faced countless challenges. He battled monstrous creatures born from the world's unraveling magic, navigated treacherous landscapes that shifted and changed beneath his feet, and resisted the temptation to abandon his quest. As Carl neared the world's edge, he was haunted by visions of the life he could have had. He saw himself living a peaceful life in the village, growing old with a family, and being remembered as a hero. The visions tugged at his heart, filling him with a deep sense of loss. But he knew that these were illusions, tricks of the mind meant to divert him from his path. He steeled himself, focusing on the task at hand. The world's edge was a desolate place, a barren wasteland where the sky met the earth in a jagged line of darkness. The air was thick with the weight of reality, pressing down on Carl as he made his way to the center of the wasteland. There, he found an ancient altar, carved from black stone and covered in runes that pulsed with a faint, eerie light. This was the place where the rite of oblivion would be performed. Carl knelt before the altar, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he was about to do. He placed the blade of eternity on the altar, its once shining surface now dull and lifeless. The ritual required him to speak a series of incantations, words of power that would unmake him. As he began the incantations, the air around him seemed to thrum with energy, the ground vibrating beneath his knees. With each word, Carl felt a part of himself slip away. His memories of the battle with the Dragon King faded, followed by the faces of his friends and family. His name, once spoken with pride, became a distant echo, lost in the void. The pain of losing himself was overwhelming, but Carl pushed through it, knowing that this was the only way to save the world. As the final words left his lips, Carl felt his body begin to dissolve, his essence merging with the magic that sustained the world. His last conscious thought was of the peace he had fought so hard to achieve, and the hope that his sacrifice would restore it. Then, there was nothing. In the aftermath of Carl's sacrifice, the world slowly began to stabilize. The cracks in the earth healed, the sky cleared, and the anomalies ceased. The villagers in Carl's hometown felt a sense of peace return, though they could not explain why. Life went on, and the memory of Carl, the forgotten hero, faded into legend. But though Carl had been erased from existence, his sacrifice was not in vain. In the quiet moments of dawn, when the first light touched the land, there was a whisper in the wind, a gentle breeze that seemed to guide the people, protecting them from unseen dangers. The new hero who emerged to face the challenges of this world was unaware of the sacrifice that had made their journey possible, but they were never truly alone. The essence of Carl, the forgotten hero, lived on, subtly influencing the world he had saved, ensuring that balance was maintained. The blade of eternity, now a forgotten relic, lay buried in a remote corner of the world, its purpose fulfilled. It would never be wielded again, but its legacy, like Carl's, would endure in the fabric of the world. The story ends not with a grand celebration, but with the quiet assurance that some sacrifices, though unseen and unremembered, are the ones that truly shape the world. As the new hero stepped into the dawn of a world subtly reshaped by Carl's sacrifice, the morning light painted the landscape with hues of gold and amber, as if nature itself was acknowledging the quiet balance restored. The villagers, unaware of the delicate thread of magic that now held their world together, went about their day with a renewed sense of peace, their lives touched by a whisper they could not hear, a whisper of protection, of guidance, that would forever shield them from the unseen forces that threatened their world. This new hero, a young warrior named Allure, had felt the shift in the world but could not explain it. Her dreams had been filled with visions of a great battle, of a hero who had sacrificed everything to save the land, but these dreams were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. She awoke each day with a sense of urgency, a feeling that there was more to her journey than the simple quests she undertook. The villagers spoke of her with admiration, unaware that she was being guided by the unseen force of the forgotten hero. Allure's journey took her across the land, where she encountered remnants of the magical unraveling that Carl's sacrifice had only just begun to heal. In the deep forests, where the trees whispered ancient secrets, she faced creatures born from the lingering instability, beasts with eyes that glowed with an unnatural light, their forms twisted by the remnants of the Dragon King's dark influence. Each battle was a test of her strength, her resolve, and though she emerged victorious, she could not shake the feeling that she was not alone, that some unseen presence was guiding her hand, steadying her heart in moments of doubt. The path led her to the ruins of an ancient city, a place where the walls still hummed with residual magic, where time itself seemed to flow differently. Here, the echoes of the past were strong, and Allure could almost hear the voices of those who had once lived there. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay, but beneath it, there was a faint fragrance of something forgotten, something noble and pure. As she explored the crumbling buildings, she felt a pull towards a hidden chamber, its entrance half buried beneath the rubble. Inside the chamber, she found an altar similar to the one Carl had knelt before at the world's edge. The runes carved into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. At the center of the altar lay a sword, simple in design, but with an aura of power that took her breath away. She approached it cautiously, her hand hovering above the hilt. The sword felt familiar, as if she had seen it before, in a dream, or perhaps in one of the fragmented visions that had haunted her since childhood. As her fingers brushed the hilt, a surge of energy coursed through her, and for a brief moment, she glimpsed the world as it had been before: the war, the battles, the final confrontation between Karl and the Dragon King. The vision was fleeting, but it was enough to fill her with a deep understanding of the sacrifices made, of the hero who had given everything for the world she now walked upon. The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave: she was not the first hero to tread this path, and she would not be the last. Elara took the sword, feeling its weight in her hand. It was a weapon of power, but it was also a symbol of something greater, a legacy of sacrifice, of heroism that transcended time and memory. She knew then that her journey was not just her own, it was the continuation of a story that had begun long before her, a story that would continue long after she was gone. The sword was a reminder of that, a beacon of hope and strength in a world that would always need heroes. The journey that followed was marked by challenges that tested Elara in ways she had never imagined. The land itself seemed to resist her, as if the magic that held it together was wary of another hero's intervention. But with each step, Elara felt the presence of Karl more strongly, guiding her, helping her to navigate the treacherous paths that lay ahead. The whisper in the wind became her constant companion, a voice that spoke not in words but in feelings, in instincts that kept her safe and led her to where she needed to be. As Elara traveled, she encountered other heroes, warriors, and mages who had also been touched by the subtle magic of Karl's sacrifice. Some were aware of the legacy they carried, while others simply followed the path laid out before them, driven by a sense of purpose they could not fully explain. Together, they formed a loose fellowship, bound by a common goal to protect the world from the shadows that lingered at its edges. The final confrontation came in a place where the boundary between reality and the magical weave was thin, a place where the air crackled with energy, and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. Here, the last remnants of the Dragon King's power had taken root, corrupting the land and warping the creatures that inhabited it. The fellowship faced horrors born of nightmares, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that this was their final stand. In the heart of this corrupted land, they found the source of the darkness, a twisted spire of black crystal that pulsed with a sickly light. The spire was a manifestation of the Dragon King's lingering influence, a node of power that threatened to undo all that Karl had sacrificed to protect. The battle that ensued was fierce, with the fellowship fighting against waves of corrupted beasts and the very land itself. Elara, wielding the sword she had found, led the charge, her every movement guided by the whisper in the wind. In the end, it was Elara who struck the final blow, driving the sword into the heart of the spire. As the blade pierced the crystal, there was a blinding flash of light, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the darkness began to recede, the land healing itself as the last of the Dragon King's influence was purged from the world. The air cleared, the ground steadied, and the fellowship stood victorious, though weary and battered from the battle. As the dust settled, Elara felt the presence of Karl one last time, a final whisper of gratitude and peace. She knew then that his essence had been woven into the very fabric of the world, a silent guardian who would always be there, guiding future generations of heroes. The sword, now devoid of its power, crumbled to dust in her hand, its purpose fulfilled. Elara bowed her head in respect, knowing that she was part of a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. The world, once again at peace, continued on, its people unaware of the sacrifices made to protect it. The story of Karl, the forgotten hero, faded into legend, a tale told around campfires and in the halls of kings. But for those who knew, for the heroes who followed in his footsteps, his legacy lived on in the whisper of the wind, in the quiet moments of dawn, and in the hearts of those who fought to keep the world safe. Alara returned to her village, where life had resumed its peaceful rhythm. She carried with her the knowledge of what had been done, the sacrifices made, and the hope that the world would remain in balance. But she also knew that the battle was never truly over, that there would always be new threats, new challenges, and new heroes to rise and meet them. And so, the story continued, a never-ending cycle of sacrifice and rebirth, of heroes rising and falling, their names forgotten by the world but remembered in the weave of magic that held it together. The legacy of Karl, the forgotten hero, lived on, not in the pages of history, but in the very fabric of the world he had saved, a testament to the power of sacrifice and the enduring strength of the human spirit.